First of all, I want to introduce myself. My name is Drew Dalton. If anybody's on Twitter, feel free to follow. It makes me feel important. But I am the chair of Hidayah. We are a nationwide organisation in the United Kingdom for LGBTQI Muslims. I myself am Muslim, have revert, and have been now for the last 3 years. And in that time, we've made some significant changes, we like to think, and movements going ahead. So I want to talk today about the work of Hidayah and what we do, and also about some of the research that we're currently doing to gain a snapshot of the lives of LGBTQI Muslims in the United Kingdom today, which we hope will inform the work of other organisations too. So, anyway, welcome. Thank you for coming to the talk. I'm not speaking to an empty audience, which is quite wonderful to see. So, by the way, I must add a caveat. I'm a Geordie, and so it means I tend to speak at 100 miles per hour. So if I get too quick, would you tell me to slow down, please? So, okay, here we go. So, a little bit of perspective in this one. Stonewall, the LGBT rights organisation, completed a survey in 2018. And these results have shown some quite interesting things around BME communities who are LGBT and also those who have a faith, which are often ignored aspects of LGBT organisations. And what we found so far is that half of BME LGBT people, 51%, have experienced discrimination, and that actually has come from the LGBT community itself because of their ethnicity. Similarly, this number rises to 3 in 5 black LGBT people, so we're seeing some kind of interesting things going on there. A third of lesbian and gay bi people of faith are not open to anybody in their faith community about their sexual orientation. They choose to hide it. And 1 in 4 trans people, which is 25%, are not open about their gender identity at all, and again, aim to hide it. Only 2 in 5 people of faith think that their faith community is welcoming of LGB people. Now, that's not including the T with the trans. So in terms of trans people, just 1 in 4 people of faith think their faith community is welcoming overall of trans people. So we're seeing some real problems here. The problem seems to stem from the fact that behind all of this, there are communities where people don't feel safe because of their sexuality, largely within their Muslim communities, in terms of our research that we found, which I'll go into soon. But then they go to an LGBT community seeking help and refuge there, and they're facing persecution because of their religious faith or their ethnicity. And so what we've tended to find is that the development of gay communities over the years has largely been run by white men. And so their voices have become really paramount, especially white gay men. So to carry this on a little bit, 1 in 8 LGBT people of faith have experienced discrimination and very poor treatment from other LGBT people in their community. This is because of their faith. And it's somewhat disheartening to see that some people feel the need to either leave their faith to be welcomed in the LGBT community or hide themselves to be welcomed in their own homes. So we're facing a disconnect. And at Hidayah, we're trying to not repair this, but we're trying to build bridges in an attempt to do this. So let's take a look at what we do. So Hidayah was formed over 3 years ago. It started initially with some co-founders. We have people on our management committee now. There's 7 of us. We represent a whole range of different groups. So we have people in there who are women who are lesbians, for example, our treasurer. We have people from Bangladeshi backgrounds, Pakistani backgrounds, white reverts like myself. We've got trans representation, people who are non-binary, bisexual, myself, gay men, and so on. And we try to keep it as inclusive as possible. And that's so we don't speak with only one voice, one dominant voice, which overtakes that of the others. Now, Hidayah itself is nationwide. And what we mean by this is that we like to think that we have a presence in most major places. That means that we run groups, which are largely social support groups in Manchester, London, and Leeds. And we have significant groups there. On average, our London group has about 40 members come to most meetings. Our Leeds group has about 20. It ranges and depends. We have contact points. So our contact points are growing. This means that if you are somebody who is questioning your sexuality, you will have a place to go and to speak to a person, to sit down and have a coffee and work out any issues or problems that you're having. So we've set up new contact points in Newcastle and Glasgow, and we have them as far as Aberdeen and Cardiff. So pretty much a nationwide spread, and we're quite proud of that fact. So that's something we're implementing now, and it's been quite a new process, because I think as an organisation we developed organically. We started off as groups and then kept the group model, but have realised actually some people need that intensive one-to-one support as well. We work with asylum seekers. We have people who come from Muslim majority backgrounds, so we've worked with asylum seekers from Egypt, Sierra Leone, the list goes on. And I personally stood up in court as witness to people because in regards to sexuality, only 95% of asylum claims for sexuality are passed. 5%, 95% are rejected. And so it's really worrying. And very often that's because we have and I'll be political on this one, we have a Home Office which largely discourages any asylum claim whatsoever, and so seek therefore to deport people back home. We've worked with the Government Equalities Office very recently. They handed out a LGBT consultation. It apparently is the most responded to survey the government's ever put out. And so we worked with the Government Equalities Office about what they can do. We worked with the Malaysian government officials to talk about what Malaysia can do to treat LGBT people better in its own nation country. So we talked about that and what things can be put into place. We've talked about campaigns and events. I'm going to show you some images of things we've done in a moment. We've done some schools outreach at the request of schools for us to come in. And we've also created documentaries on our Hidayah website, which if I have enough time toward the end, because I talk too much and I've probably filled this up with too much, we have our Hidayah website, which has a documentary up there. You might remember the whole furore about the Islamic wedding between two men at one point, which got a lot of furore. There's a documentary up there with those two men on talking about their experience about that. We've had roundtable events with Rabia and the British Muslims for Secular Democracy. And we've also, just yesterday, had a huge conference of over 200 people in Birmingham, where we asked the question about intersectionality, where Islam comes into this, and we invited people who weren't just LGBT Muslims, they were also people who were invested within it, so from communities, parents, families, we had all manner of people come to the conference, and that was fantastic. I'm a huge fan, as I said in one of the other workshops, of contact theory. And I very much believe that the closer you are to a group and you understand each other's needs, that you become more sympathetic to those needs. Ideologically and theologically, you may not agree. That's fine. Other people can sit and work on that. We've got bridges to build in the meantime. So we currently have our Life as an LGBTQI plus Muslim survey, which is ongoing. I'm going to talk about this in a moment and what that does. We're trying to capture a snapshot, because in my day job, I'm a sociologist, so I love data, and it brings out the geek in me. And so we're putting together a survey at the moment. So far, we've had over 82 respondents. That was last Thursday, and the survey is ongoing till May, so we expect to pick up a lot more. So some of the things that we've done. We've ran events with Ezra, is one of our committee members. We've ran events within different locations across the UK. And we did some school-based. We had a school invite us in, which was a Muslim majority school. And they invited us in and said, we want you to talk, because it's LGBT History Month in February, we want you to kind of combat some of the narrative that's been going on, as you may have seen in the news, about the head teacher of another school elsewhere. So we want you to come in and just simply talk about what it's like. How does it feel? So we did. We went to the school and we asked the children, and we're talking to secondary school here, so 11 plus, can you be LGBT plus in religion? And we were absolutely overjoyed to see these results. We left a bit of paper out. We had no intentions whatsoever, we had no intentions whatsoever to kind of give any narrative behind it. We just asked them a simple question. And as you can see by the result, it was fantastic. And it's really nice to see generational shifts and changes and attitudes going on. For many of the people who we deal with, they would have appreciated that when they were a lot younger as well, I'm sure. We also run different types of events for public speaking, so we take part occasionally in prides, but we kind of pulled back from that a little bit because it isn't always particularly successful. I think sometimes you get lost in amongst a sea of many people, so we're focusing on certain prides like UK Black Pride, things like that to get our message across a lot better. But we've also done talks in universities. There's an awful picture of me up there. And where we've done talks at universities across the UK talking about experiences to religious studies departments, theology departments, and so on, to get conversations going at all levels. That's the point, isn't it? And yesterday's conference, which we're really quite proud of, we were buzzing with this. We got a great take-up at the conference, and we hope to hold another one. We're thinking about going for one next year. Well, actually, that was the response of people yesterday. When's the next one? I was frazzled. And I was like, really? Just need a little break first, I think. One of the other things we do is we work, because all of us are, to some extent or another, regarded as either cultural or practicing Muslims, and so we make it our aim to go out there and do good work as well. So we've done a lot of work around poverty as well, Ramadan shoebox appeals, things like that. We've done all sorts. So we kind of keep the message very broad. There's two parts to Hidayah. If you want to come and seek support and go to a social group or a contact point, it's there for you. However, if you want to help us raise visibility of LGBT Muslims, which frankly isn't there, that's the other part of what we do. So it's kind of recognizing that we're out there, we're not invisible, we do exist, and we're here. Make sense so far? Cool. All right then. So, it gets to the survey. So the survey so far. The aim is to take a snapshot of life. And we know it's not all-encompassing, a survey never is. However, it's an early start. There's very little written about LGBT Muslims. There's some theological stuff out there by Scott Kugel, so if anyone else wants to have that theological discussion, that's for another session, I would argue. But I would recommend the work of Scott Kugel. It's particularly good. However, what we're more interested in is making sure that LGBT Muslims are represented and that they exist, and support there for them. So the first phase is the survey. We've checked this, we developed it, we made sure that everybody recognised that it is valid for all of them. So we had it looked over by trans organisations and other organisations, say, are there voices in there? Is this survey fair? And our data collection's ongoing, and we've got 82 respondents so far, although after the conference yesterday, I hope a lot more. Phase 2 is interviews. So I'm going to be doing this one with the team. We're going to train up a load of researchers who are under the umbrella of queer Muslims, to train them up to research and interview other people. And that'll be part of a much larger research project that we hope to get out there, and we want to apply for funding for that. So we're collecting some interview data in times to come, and we're collecting literature reviews at the moment as well. And we hope to do that with the University of Sunderland. That's a plan. So these are the early findings. This is a bit of a snapshot so far. We've modelled it off things like the British Social Attitude Survey, which asks the British public, about 10,000 people every year, what are your opinions on certain subject areas, from immigration to politics and so on. We modelled it off something very similar. So 1 being strongly agree, 5 being strongly disagree. The initial picture looks a little grim. My sexuality is regarded by my family as dishonourable. What we do find is that very often culture and religion mix with people's viewpoints. And there has to sometimes be a little separation of this. And so close to 3/4 of people responded that they strongly agree. People fear bringing dishonour to their families. And, excuse me, and really disturbingly, they've overheard their family, or had it directly, speaking animosity towards LGBT people themselves. So they've actually sat in the same room when that's been happening. And so that's obviously from a mental health point of view, which is higher in amongst the LGBT community per population, as are mental health risks. Then we have to be asking the question, are we having the right conversations in the right way about things? Also, people fear being shunned when asked about their sexuality, or if they come out or are found out. We've had some extreme cases where people have used blackmail by family members and have threatened to tell their other family members about themselves. So obviously that doesn't bode well for people's well-being. And so other figures showed that most people who answered the questions on coming out feared coming out to their family overall. So that all seems pretty bad so far, doesn't it? However, when people do come out, it's a broad category, but their family felt largely quite supportive. Now, we don't know until we drill down into the data what this means. So we don't know whether this means that your sister's supportive, but your mother's not. We don't know that, and we won't know that until we go further into the information on this one. But we have found largely overall those who do come out have had a better system. We don't know yet whether that means that family member has said, oh, you can come out, but don't tell anybody. Just talk to me. So we need to do the interviews to explore this much further. Other people, when asked for those who have come out, to one extent or another, they felt much more comfortable about themselves as a result of that. So we're seeing some sea change, is what I'm saying. And family is just an area that we started to ask about. We've asked about communities, so we'll move on to that one. What I find really disheartening about this one is that when asked the question, there's no support to Muslim people who are LGBT in Muslim communities. Pretty much most people fit into categories 1 or 2. They disagree strongly, agree or strongly agree. And that's a little worrying, because where do they go? They then go to the LGBT scene, where they may then face Islamophobia, or they may face racism. So where do you go? You're stuck in a grey area, aren't you? You're in the middle. You can't tell your family or community. You feel there's no community there for you to speak to, so you then go out and seek it, and you can't find it. And that's where we think the role of Hidayah comes into it. We think we fit into that grey area. You're not in the gay scene, you're not around your Muslim community, as it were, but you've got a safe space to be yourself. There's a lot of role models for me as an LGBT Muslim. Again, strongly disagree. So some of the initial stats have thrown up some interesting results. Some of them we thought we knew already, but other ones have been a little bit more surprising. A mixed bag was that I feel welcomed by the LGBT community. I found this one fascinating. Most people are quite ambivalent toward it, and most of the results are clustering into the middle. And also, those who are in the LGBT community understand the needs faced by LGBT Muslims. This is another one that we've seen quite a number of articles come out recently and quite a bit of research to show the issues around Islamophobia and racism in the gay scene and the gay community. And so this one's quite clearly starting to affect some of these categories. When asked about the wider Islamic community, most people strongly disagree that they can be open about themselves. Now, I always think it's a little bit like trying to contain water, isn't it? You can't contain water. It will always find a way out of the glass. And so this is kind of similar to that. What happens when people can't contain that and they can't tell anybody? And that in itself raises bigger questions on people's health and well-being. Finally, before we get to some of their comments, and how am I doing for time?
You have 5 minutes.
I was going to swear there, sorry. I'm hopeful for the future of LGBT Muslims in the UK. I thought this was brilliant. This was an unexpected one. It wasn't a picture of grim damnation and all that kind of stuff. Most of the people, and we're seeing this in the results of even just that activity in the schools, of generations of people who perhaps are maybe shifting attitudes. In sociology, we call this a demographic shift. That demographics have different kind of cultural patterns or ideas. And so there's some kind of hope there for the future ahead. However, there were some comments. We left an open comments boxes with specific questions and asked people to comment. One of the questions was, are there any issues that you as an LGBT Muslim face that are quite unique to that of other LGBT people? One person responded, in Muslim communities, men who are gay and effeminate are discriminated against. Being gay is being seen as something to be ashamed of and as dishonourable. When I was growing up, I was conditioned from a young age to be silent and to not speak out. I always felt that if I did anything that would bring dishonor and shame to my family, then this would trigger them to become abusive to me. Other people said, religious persecution and hate from those within the community they're seeking safety from. Others said having discussions about sexuality without it being whispered around communities. People said naturally racism and Islamophobia, which appeared quite a bit. And others said homophobia and rejection from within their own community. And I quite like this quote, it's being caught in a hate sandwich, constantly having to try to explain yourself. Other ones that were asked, what would you like to see in other terms of issues, as safe places of worship? Religion and culture are intertwined, and we're a big believer at Hidayah that people very often use culture in place of religion in some cases, and think that can be a real problem. Or constant bashing from Islamic leaders telling them that their existence is a contradiction in terms. Or Muslim parents who have a lack of understanding about LGBT communities. They simply don't want to learn about it, they don't want to accept it, they will believe it's a phase, or they will ignore your feelings entirely, and identity. And if your core identity feels that it's being stripped away from you, or erased, or no longer shown, that has quite dramatic effects on you. We do know that LGBT people stand at a high risk of suicide, particularly trans people, who stand at a much higher risk of it. So all of these kind of have those kind of psychosocial effects. I love this one. Islam versus identity, family versus identity, community versus identity. Which one do you give up? Can you give them up? And I'm going to skip on because we're running out of time.
1 minute left.
1 minute. Some of the biggest challenges some people face on a daily basis is simply being their true self. Or parents finding out. Many of our board members are not out. They push me to the front. Whenever the media talk to us, it's Drew. So one person went, is it just white people at Hidayah? And I was like, no, that's just me, because I'm the only one who speaks to the media. But also adapting gender behavior amongst trans people to be able to pass, which is difficult in itself. Constant lies, living double lives, being worried about safety, hearing families naming and shaming and insulting gay people. And I thought this was the tragic one, and I'm going to end on this one, is that knowing that I want to have a happy, normal life, getting married, having a family, then I have to move away from my hometown. Knowing fine well that I may never be able to move back, and knowing that once I am fully out, things will have changed irreversibly for me, and that I'll no longer be a welcome member of the Muslim community in my own hometown. Now, I'm not sure about you, but I think that's tragic. I think we need to be doing something about this. If people feel the need to move away entirely from their hometowns and never feel welcome back, that's something that we need to be working on. So there's a few different issues. Some of it was surprising, some of it is somewhat tragic, and these are the issues we deal with on a regular basis. We meet people all the time, be it in our groups or be it one-to-one, in our contact points, and we get requests literally from all over the world. We're UK-based, so we can't do it. But we're trying to work in partnership with other Muslim LGBT organisations. And we were really heartened at yesterday's conference to see people come from Denmark, the USA, in fact, a couple of people from the USA, and we had people come from Sweden, and we had people come from Spain. So they're coming from all over the world, and there's a need to address this. This can't be an invisible issue that we don't talk about for much longer. We have people who have faced the most awful marriages of convenience to escape their family's gaze. This isn't good enough. These don't work. They're temporary elastoplasts for a much bigger solution and problem that we're simply not talking about. So, to come to the end, because I've went over, if anyone would like to know more, then our website is hidayahlgbt.co.uk. On there, you'll find information about our services. So if you do have anyone who ever comes out, or you feel that somebody needs that support, then please direct them toward us. And thank you very much for listening.